1 in 3. That's how many American men will face physical violence, sexual assault, or stalking by an intimate partner. 1 in 3 women worldwide will endure physical or sexual abuse, most often by someone they know. But domestic abuse isn't just bruises. It's manipulation, it's fear, it's control that seeps into every part of your life. I'm Ingrid Dutton, and I survived it. Then I created 1 in 3 so no one else has to suffer in silence. Each week, we break that silence together. Occasionally joined by survivors, loved ones, and experts, we talk about the pain, yes, but also about the healing, resilience, and the fight to reclaim your life. This podcast is more than awareness, it's a lifeline. And a reminder, you are seen, you are heard, you are never alone. Search for 1 in 3 wherever you get your podcasts, because every voice matters and every story deserves to be heard.
UFOs, or unidentified flying objects, have been a topic of discussion since ancient times. In the 18th century, it was widely debated among philosophers, scientists, and theologians on whether or not they existed, with the majority of the population believing that they did. In the 19th century, something began to change. People began seeing flying ships and other objects that they could recognize in the air. It wasn't until 1947 that our obsession with UFOs became more solidified.
Hey guys, welcome to another situation. I'm Ingrid, and that lovely voice you heard at the beginning of this episode was my little sister Jessica. For those of you who normally listen to us, you're going to notice things are a bit wonky this time around. Unfortunately, there were some pavers in front of her house that cut her internet line, so we weren't able to have our usual virtual meetup to tell our stories. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Let me quickly tell you how this is typically done. Jessica and I meet up online. We tell each other stories. These stories range from just everything, to be honest. We try to find some topics. A lot of times we base it off of different monthly observances, and sometimes it's a little bit different based on listener requests, or sometimes listeners submit their own stories for us to share. So if you have not listened to all the episodes, I really encourage you to go through and find the ones specifically with our guests on. We've had some amazing situations and just really great stories, I think. And our guests have all been wonderful. We love them all. We are so appreciative of all of them. So go back, find a topic that might interest you, or find a topic you don't know about and take a listen. And hopefully enjoy it. What we try to do is create an environment where it feels like you're just kind of hanging out with some friends, listening to stories. So anyway, speaking of monthly observances, let me tell you how we got to today's topic, UFOs. And guys, don't tell Jessica, but I'm really not crazy about this episode. I have no prejudice against anybody who believes in aliens. I just don't. I guess maybe I'm just happy with our little earthlings that we have around. And quite frankly, humans are enough for me to deal with. I don't want to have to think about any other beings elsewhere. But we were talking about what kind of topics we could maybe look for. And actually, we were looking at August, and I had sent her a screenshot of some notes I had taken before, and July's notes were still there, and July 2nd is UFO Day. And she saw that. She said, oh my gosh, let's do UFOs. I immediately said no. But unfortunately, my kids were in the background. They overheard the conversation, and they begged for us to do UFOs. So here we are. I just Googled most credible UFO stories, and I actually found some from history.com. I'm just going to share 3 of them with you guys. They're very short. I had already let Jessica know that she was going to have to carry us on this one because, again, like I said, it's just not my favorite topic. So put on your aluminum helmets and let's get into it. So on July 14th, 2001, in New Jersey, there was something that stopped traffic. Just after midnight, for approximately 15 minutes, there was a strange orange and yellow lights that made a V formation over the Arthur Kill waterway between Staten Island and Carteret, New Jersey. And one of the witnesses was the Carteret Police Department Lieutenant Daniel Tarrant, or Tarrant, Tarrant, and a lot of other witnesses. So these witnesses were from the Throgs Neck Bridge on Long Island and Fort Lee, New Jersey, near the George Washington Bridge. And apparently there's a group known as the New York Strange Phenomena Investigators, NY-SPI, and they claimed to have received FAA radar data that corroborated the UFO sightings from that night. Ooh, it's so exciting. Okay, the second story I have is from 2004. So on November 14th, 2004, the USS Princeton, which was part of the USS Nimitz carrier strike group, noticed an unknown craft about 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. And they had been tracking objects that appeared at 80,000 feet and then plummeted to hover right above the Pacific Ocean. And so when they spotted this on the radar, they sent two FA-18F fighter jets from the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz. And when they arrived, they noticed the water was churning and there was an oval-shaped shadow underneath the surface. Then a white tic-tac shaped object appeared above the water. And there were no markings to make it look like it was any kind of aircraft carrier, any kind of motorized vehicle or anything. Black Aces Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, they tried to get the aircraft or watercraft. They weren't really sure what it was, but it suddenly accelerated away and it suddenly appeared on radar 60 miles away. And it moved 3 times at the speed of sound. So, wow, that's exciting too. I really apologize for my lack of enthusiasm, but I guess, I'm not totally opposed to aliens, but I suppose it's how I feel kind of about paranormal things. I really want to believe in the paranormal, but I just feel that there's so many ways to explain a lot of the things away. And if there's not, that's exciting to me, but I don't know that I can fully make that commitment to believe. So here's my last one I'm going to share with you. So this is from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. On November 7th, 2006, there were 12 United Airline employees, along with a few witnesses outside the airport that saw a dark gray metallic craft just hovering over gate C-17. And that happened around 4:15 p.m. And it hovered there for around 5 minutes before suddenly shooting upward. It broke a hole in the clouds, enough that pilots and mechanics could see the blue sky. So this was actually printed in the Chicago Tribune's website and made international news. But it was not seen on radar, so the FAA called it a weather phenomenon and declined to investigate. So you see, some of these things can be explained. I'm sure Jessica's stories are going to be much more riveting because she's a little bit more into this than I am. So please don't turn this off. Keep listening because the best is yet to come.
Hey everyone, it's very strange not having my sister to bounce this off of, but hopefully you all enjoy. I'm going to go over the abduction of Betty and Barney Hills. Hopefully it's not the same one that Ingrid did, because I actually have no idea what she covered this week. So Betty and Barney Hill, they were from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And they were taking a little vacation. They were a biracial couple, very involved with civil rights groups and just very active. And so they took a little vacation and they were on their way back. So on their way back, they saw this strange light in the sky. And so they started driving faster. And at first it looked like a falling star, but kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Barney, the husband, who seemed to know about the planes and stuff very well, said that it was nothing they had to worry about, that it was just a satellite. And so the light began to move with the car as he steered toward the mountains, and it like zigged and it zagged and went behind the moon, behind trees and mountain ridges, and then show up again. And it kind of seemed as if it was like a game of cat and mouse. And they thought it was just an illusion. So they decided to pull over at a road stop at kind of like what are they called? A turnout, wayside. They kind of pulled over at a wayside. And Betty saw that the object was actually an object spinning in the air. They drove on and she began to think it was more than just a satellite. So Barney, he was more of a realist, and he didn't believe that flying saucers existed. So he knew it wasn't a helicopter. He knew it wasn't a plane because it was too quiet, but he was beginning to get worried. So they kept driving home, and then the object stopped and was hovering just above the trees. So he stopped the car and he kept the engine running, and then he grabbed his gun. When he got out of the car and went into the field, and he left Betty in the car. What he saw was as big as a jet, but as round and flat as a pancake. And behind the rows of windows, gray uniformed beings seemed to look right at him. He said he tried to lift his hand to his pistol, but he somehow couldn't move, and a voice told him not to put down his binoculars. So he had a thought that they were about to get captured, and he started yelling hysterically back to the car and trying to tell Betty to get out. So she had her head out the car window, and then without explanation, there was these loud noises coming from the car's trunk. And the couple said that they felt tired and they lost consciousness. They came to 2 hours later and 35 miles down the road. So they get back home. Are trying to figure out what's going on. They don't quite understand what it is. And Betty, who was, she loved to read, she checked out some books from the library and reached out to some civilian UFO groups. And she also reported it to their experience to the Air Force, which helped which helped start up Project Blue Book, which I'll talk about after this story. So in the coming years, Betty used to have some really disturbing dreams, and Barney got an ulcer and anxiety. They sought mental health help, and they met a psychiatrist and a neurologist who specialized in hypnosis. So they both decided to go under hypnosis, and the doctor, Dr. Simon, helped them figure out what had actually happened. So what they say happened was that a vessel landed on top of their car and put them to sleep. And then gray beings walked them up a long ramp and into the spacecraft. And they were separated, and they both took turns in an examination room that had curved walls and a large light hanging from the ceiling. And they both were put on a metal table. And the table was so short that Barney's legs hung over the side. So during the examination, their clothes were removed. The aliens took some of the strands of their hair. They took clippings of their fingernails and scraped at their skin. And each sample was placed into on a clear material that kind of looked like a glass slide. Needles were collected to wires, which probed their heads, arms, legs, and spines. One large needle was inserted into Betty's belly, and they call this a quote-unquote pregnancy test. And she remembered it being very painful. And so then Betty and Barney called a person the leader, quote-unquote the leader, and he watched from the side, he or she. After Betty's examination were done, they rushed her back in the room, and then they found out that Barney's teeth could be removed. Betty laughed, explaining that Barney actually had dentures. So the aliens thought that they were actually teeth, but they were dentures. And the aliens did not seem to understand exactly what dentures were. So later on, Betty said she remembers admitting that she knew little of the universe, and that the leader joked around with her and said, "If you don't know where you are, there wouldn't be any point in telling you where I am." And so under hypnosis, she drew a star map she drew a star map that was shown to her while she was on the ship. So this story was picked up in the newspaper, and it did eventually become a best-selling book. And this kind of was like the blueprint for talking about being abducted. The gray hats, the aliens, the probes, the big lights, the metal table, and things like that. So this is what it is. This is their story. There's more to it if you want to read their book, but some believe that, of course, that the Hills were making it up. Excuse me. And that many say that they were just under stress because they're an interracial couple living in a predominantly white state in New Hampshire. And so the year of their hypnosis was 1964, which was marked by Cold War tensions and civil rights unrest, with numerous urban riots erupting that summer. So they used a lot of try to explain it off was because of their races. And it says, look at what those aliens were, a mixture of black and white. I find that very meaningful. I don't know who that guy was, but that's what Bader said. So a lot of so this is more why they believe it's a myth. So the first-hand accounts, they say that memories can be distorted by stress or distraction, and that they can even be created. When a false memory is in place, you don't really know that it's a false memory because you tend to believe that it is. And that there also is a thing called patternicity, which is the tendency to see patterns even when none exist. So we can see, that's how we see faces in clouds, or like Jesus in toast, or whatever else we all see. Past experiences also shape human perception. Barney, who was a World War II vet, thought the gray head looked like Hitler? Jeez, Hitler, and seemed menacing. Betty was excited to see the aliens, and she said that they were affable. So, and that she even said that the alien gave her a book to bring back to Earth with her, but that everyone else actually decided that she could no longer bring the book home with her. And so there's a lot of things that say that this is not true, that they made it up. Bader, that's the guy from Project Blue Book. I think that's who that is. So Dr. Simon, who's a psychiatrist who put the Hills under hypnosis, said that he never thought that they made up the story. He said that he concluded, he never felt that the Hills made up the story. He concluded that Betty had dreamed the abduction and Barney had absorbed her story, which I think that as a mental health diagnosis, it's like foi de lieu, where you take on someone else's delusions and you live in that delusion with them. And so it kind of sounds what he's talking about. He said, I believe implicitly in the honesty of these people. So he believes that they actually believe they experienced these and that they weren't trying to pull one over on people. So the other explanation is that the abduction actually occurred. And so the couple never felt that it was a false memory, didn't believe it was sleep paralysis. Betty actually became a pretty well-known voice in UFO research and claimed she was visited multiple times in the following decades. And so I believe that, oh goodness, guys, you know how organized I am not. So I think that's the end of that. So that's abrupt. So that was kind of like the original abduction story that started abduction stories and started Project Blue Book, which was actually a TV show on the History Channel. So a lot of my information came from thehistory.com, and I also watched the TV show because I just thought it was cool because it's true. So Project Blue Book was put on by the Air Force, and it was kind of started, it goes back to 1947, which I talked about in the intro. Kenneth Arland, he was a pilot, and he saw 9 objects flying over Mount Rainier over in Washington. And so that was started a report of unidentified flying objects. The the U.S. Air Force also began an investigation into these sightings called Operation Sign in 1948. So the Hills were abducted in the 60s, around the Civil War time, but this is kind of one of the earlier things. This is kind of what also started Project Blue Book. So the initial investigation, I'm so sorry. So that was the initial one, but I guess the Hills is probably what made it more popular. So Project Blue Book was started in 1952. The project became the longest running of the U.S. government's official inquiries into UFO sightings, compiling more than 12,000 sightings or related events from 1952 to its dismantling in 1969. Oh, so it ended shortly after the Hills. Sorry, you'd think I would have known this information a little bit better. So the early sightings were mostly by pilots, and then it kind of goes over. So Project Blue Book, the formation of it, they used a scientist. I believe he was a physician. Okay, so Project Blue Book, they just would go and study all these claims of UFOs. On the TV show, they had a lot of the sightings written off to, of course, weather balloons, anomalies in the atmosphere. I don't think they founded a single UFO. So that's probably why it was dismantled. The government. Hynek, that was the astronomer's name. Hynek was the scientist that was part of Project Blue Book. So the TV show, it's the astronomer, Dr. Hynek, and an Air Force officer that goes around and explores all across the U.S. some of these claims of UFOs. There's one by the Washington Monument. There's a bunch over in Washington State. So if you ever, I think the Pacific Northwest has the highest amount of UFO sightings. So one thing that I did find that was super interesting about UFOs is all these, I think it was last year, I think it was mid-COVID, when these Navy pilots were going out and seeing all these shapes that they didn't understand, like the one called the Tic Tac, where you can see it on the radar and it looks like a little Tic Tac moving, kind of like what the Hills said, like zigzagged, almost like playing cat and mouse, like hopping all around. And these Navy pilots were in fighter jets, so they're in pretty fast vehicles, but they still couldn't catch up to the little Tic Tacs. And there's a bunch of other stories coming out like that. So this is one of those things that, there's kind of enough facts out there and like testimony that make you want to think like, yeah, it might be true. But then, of course, it's so hard to believe that there could be, and that nothing, like we haven't had full contact yet, that no one's, that it's not like a well-known thing. Like, oh yeah, that's our neighbors over on Uranus. That's who it is. There's not aliens. That's who it is. But, all right, that was it for mine. It was really awkward doing this on my own. So thank goodness I don't have a podcast on my own. Apologies for this week, everybody. We should be back and at it next week. And thank you all for listening, keeping it short and sweet. And if you've ever seen a UFO or anything like that, give a shout out and let us know. I've seen I've seen satellites moving in the air. I've seen some questionable things, but that could have also just been my imagination or a glare off a plane or a glare off of something. I don't know. Could have been anything. But all right, take care. Don't get abducted. And I hope you enjoyed Ingrid's part. This is uncomfortable. And all right. Bye, guys.
Okay, yay, we made it. Hopefully you guys made it all the way through that episode. If there's one thing that I've learned, I certainly cannot do this by myself. I think Jessica said the same thing. Next week we will be back to normal, thank goodness. But we really do appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to each of us. And listen, like Jessica said, if you have any UFO stories and sightings or abductions or anything, please let us know. We'll stick it on our next episode, regardless of what the episode's about. There's also a fun little feature on our website. If you haven't seen it, you can leave us a voicemail. So if there's ever a little clip of a quick story you want us to share, we can actually share your audio clip on our podcast with your permission, of course. So give that a look. It's anothersituationpodcast.com. But anyway, you all know how to get in touch with us. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, email, website. whatever. But next week, we're doing something kind of fun and scary. Sister's Day is always the first Sunday of August, and in celebration, we're doing an episode on us. Yay. That doesn't sound narcissistic at all. But our cousin Kara has agreed to come on, and she's going to ask us a series of questions, and we're going to answer them without the other person hearing and then switch it up. So this will give us a chance to let you guys get to know us a little bit better. And hopefully there won't be too many embarrassing stories or tears or, PTSD or counseling needed after this. But anyway, thank you guys for listening to us ramble. We love you all, and be safe, be not abducted, be wary of what happens in the skies, and just be. Bye.
If you'd like to reach out to us or submit your situation, please contact us at anothersituationpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at Another Situation Podcast. We're also on Facebook at Another Situation.
Another Situation is produced and edited by Point 5 Pinoy. Music is written and performed by Tim Crow.